Some people think wickedness announces itself. That it arrives with a warning. That you will sense it before it reaches you. But what if wickedness smelled like fried dough and cinnamon? What if it greeted you every morning with a smile and called you by name? What if the thing that had been feeding your family for years, the thing you trusted without question, was built on a secret so dark that when it finally came out, grown people sat down on the pavement and wept? This is a story about a woman in Durban. About the food that made her famous. And about the morning one customer arrived too early and saw something she was never supposed to see. Welcome to Helen's Cultural Stories, where every week we bring you powerful African stories that entertain, inspire, and teach you something real. If you are new here, please hit the like button right now, drop a comment below, and subscribe and ring that bell so you never miss a story like this one. Now, let us go to Durban. To a street corner in Umlotsi. And to a woman everybody called Mama Siki. Nobody remembered when Mama Siki first appeared on that corner. She was simply there one morning, the way certain things in a neighborhood become permanent without anyone deciding it. A plastic table, a gas burner, 2 deep black pots, and the smell that stopped people mid-stride. Vetkoek, fried bread dough, golden and round, split open and filled with whatever you wanted, curried beans, polony and cheese, chocoloka, peanut butter and syrup for the children. In Umlotsi, Vetkoek was breakfast, lunch, comfort, and ceremony all at once. And Mama Siki's Vetkoek was, by every account, the finest anyone had ever tasted. Her real name was Nokokenya Dlamini, but nobody called her that. She had been Mama Siki for so long that even she sometimes had to pause when someone addressed her formally. She was a large woman with a wide face that seemed to have been designed specifically for laughing. She wore the same faded doek every day and changed only its color, blue on Mondays, yellow midweek, red on Fridays. The regulars had learned to use the doek as a calendar, and the regulars were many. But what nobody could explain, not her competitors, not the food scientists who ate there as a curiosity, not the women who had been frying Vetkoek in Umlotsi for 30 years, was why hers tasted so different from everyone else's. Reputation is a powerful thing. It can build a person higher than their character deserves, and it can fall further than anyone expects when the foundation is finally examined. The queue at Mama Siki's stand formed before sunrise. This was not an exaggeration. By 5:30 a.m., there were already 8 people waiting. By 6 a.m., the number was 30. By 6:30, if you were not already holding your order, you were going home with nothing. Taxi drivers called ahead. One man, a construction foreman named Becky, had a standing arrangement every weekday, 6 Vetkoek with curried beans, wrapped and ready by 6:15. He said he had tried other vendors. He kept coming back. Something about Mama Siki's was different. He could not explain it any better than that. A primary school down the road had unofficially appointed her as their breakfast supplier. The teachers chipped in money each morning and sent the security guard to collect. The children could tell when the guard came back with Mama Siki's order versus anyone else's. The sound of unwrapping was different, more eager. Meanwhile, 3 other Vetkoek sellers on the same street watched and wondered. They used the same flour, the same oil, the same fillings. Sometimes they even bought their ingredients from the same sponsor shop. Still, their queues thinned and Mama Siki's grew. One woman, Auntie Zodwa, who had been selling Vetkoek since before Mama Siki arrived, once bought 3 of Mama Siki's pieces and took them home. She broke them apart, examined the dough, tasted each layer separately. She made notes. She adjusted her own recipe and fried a new batch. The next morning she offered her new version to a customer for free. The customer chewed, looked thoughtful, then said, "It's nice, but it's not Mama Siki's." Auntie Zodwa said nothing, but something in her expression shifted. When a competitor's success cannot be explained by visible factors, the explanation is either exceptional skill or something hidden. Wisdom pays attention to which one it is. The woman who would unravel everything was named Polisa Kumolo. She was 34, a bookkeeper at a small hardware company in the industrial area near Pinetown, a woman who ran her life on lists and schedules and who was constitutionally incapable of arriving anywhere less than 10 minutes early. She had been a Mama Siki customer for 2 years, not every day, but 3 or 4 mornings a week. She had introduced the Vetkoek to her colleagues, her sister, and her neighbor's husband, who now made a special detour every Saturday. She was, By any measure, one of Mama Siki's most devoted customers. Which made what happened next even more complicated. It started with a simple frustration. For 3 consecutive mornings, Polisa had arrived to find the trays empty. Not low, empty. She had even rushed one morning, taking an earlier taxi and walking the last stretch instead of waiting for a connection. Still empty. She stood at the bare trays and looked at Mama Siki. Mama Siki, how does Vetkoek finish before I even wake up? Mama Siki laughed her wide laugh. Polisa, my child, you are competing with the taxi drivers. They wake up with the roosters. The people around them laughed. Polisa did not laugh. She was already planning. Determination is a quiet thing. It does not announce itself in the moment, it shows up the next morning, earlier than yesterday. That evening, Polisa set her alarm for 4:30 am. Her sister, who shared the house, heard her getting up and called from the bedroom. Polisa, where are you going at this time? To buy Vetkoek. A pause. At 4:30 in the morning. If I go at 6, it finishes. I am going early. Another pause. Polisa, it is just Vetkoek. Good night, Snee. She dressed quietly, wrapped herself against the early morning Durban chill, the kind that surprised visitors who expected KwaZulu-Natal to always be warm, and stepped outside. The streets of Umlotsi at 4:45 am had their own particular silence. A few security guards at their post. A bakkie making an early delivery somewhere. The distant sound of a radio from a house where someone worked early shifts. The sky was the deep blue of not yet morning. Polisa walked with purpose. When she reached the corner, she could see the orange glow of Mama Siki's gas burner already lit. The pots were warming. The table was being arranged. She was the first customer. Mama Siki looked up, surprised. Then she smiled. Polisa, you woke up with the ancestors today. Polisa laughed and chose her spot to wait. That was when she noticed Mama Siki move toward the narrow passageway beside the old building adjacent to the corner. It was a dark, unpleasant gap between structures, the kind of place that collected litter and cats and things best not examined. No one went there by choice. Mama Siki disappeared into it carrying one of her large mixing bowls. Polisa watched the passageway. Proximity reveals what distance conceals. Sometimes the most important information in your life has always been available, you simply needed to arrive earlier. Mama Siki returned from the passageway 2 minutes later. She was carrying the bowl. It was covered with a cloth now. She set it beside the gas burner, adjusted the cloth, and began preparing as though nothing had happened. Her movements were the same as always, practiced, efficient, calm. Polisa said nothing immediately. She washed the bowl. 5 minutes passed. Another early customer arrived, an older man named Mr. Seal who walked to the stand every morning from 3 streets away. Mama Siki, he said, greeting her. Mr. Seal, she replied. First as always. This lady was here before me today, he said, nodding at Polisa. Mama Siki glanced at Polisa. Something crossed her face, very briefly, that was not quite a smile. Polisa waited until a few more customers had gathered. Then she said, casually, the way you say something when you are pretending it is not important. Mama Siki, what were you fetching from the passageway there? The gas burner hissed steadily. Mama Siki did not look up immediately. Nothing, my child. I forgot something there yesterday. In that passageway. Mr. Seal frowned mildly. What would you put there? Just something, Mama Siki said. Her voice had changed. Not dramatically, but enough. Polisa noticed. A deflected question is not the same as an answered one. The gap between what was asked and what was said is where the truth lives. The queue had grown to 15 people by now, and the question had taken on a life of its own. The way these things spread in a queue, one person repeating it to the next, that person adding their own question, the next person connecting it to something they thought they noticed before, the conversation moved up and down the line like electricity. What was she doing in the passageway? Why does she have that bowl covered? Come to think of it, why does nobody know exactly what she puts in the dough? Mama Siki answered each version of the question with a different deflection. She forgot something. She was checking the wall for a crack. She was looking for her cloth from yesterday. Each answer slightly different from the last. Mr. Seal, who was 68 years old and had spent a lifetime watching people, said nothing. He just watched Mama Siki's hands. A market woman who had joined the queue, A stout woman named Modlemini who sold tomatoes 2 streets over, put her hands on her hips and said what everyone was thinking. Mama Siki, we have been buying your Vetkoek for years. We have sent our children here. We have served your food at our family events. If there is nothing to hide, just explain what happened in that passageway and let us all rest. The queue murmured in agreement. Mama Siki's hand stilled over the bowl. For the first time since Police had known her, the wide laughing face was not laughing. A community's trust is not just a commercial asset, it is a covenant. When that covenant is sensed to be under threat, even the most patient people will eventually demand an answer. What happened next, nobody who was present would forget for the rest of their lives. Mama Siki, Nokukenya Dlamini, who had fed this neighborhood for years, who had laughed at the empty trees and teased the latecomers and become as permanent as the corner itself, sat down on her own stool. She sat down like someone whose legs had quietly resigned. She covered her face with both hands. The queue fell silent. Modlemini took a small step forward. Mama Siki. When the voice came, it was unrecognizable. Not the voice of the woman who called you by name and remembered how you liked your feeling and saved an extra piece for the schoolchildren who came with not quite enough money. It was a thinner voice. Frightened. Years ago, she began. When I was starting out. When nobody was buying. When I was going home every night with full trays and empty pockets. She stopped. The gas burner continued to hiss. Someone told me about a man, near Komoshu. They said he could help with business. Desperation is a door that opens inward. Once you step through it far enough, it becomes very difficult to find the way back out. This is not a reason to judge without understanding, but it is a reason to be honest about the cost of choices made in dark seasons. The man near Komoshu. Nobody asked her his name. Perhaps they did not want to know. Perhaps knowing would make the story real in a way that could not be walked back from. She had gone to him, she said, after 6 months of failure. She had borrowed money to buy ingredients and gone home 3 nights in a row with products she could not sell. Her children were asking questions she did not know how to answer. The man had spoken to her. He had given her instructions. He had told her that what she added to the dough would never be detected, that it would simply make people want more, that it would bind customers to her stand the way nothing else could. She had been horrified. She had said no. She went home. 2 weeks later, she went back. He gave her a small container. He told her she needed only a tiny amount. He said it was something from the human body, her own body, and that in the tradition he walked within, it created an invisible thread between the food and the one who consumed it. She had used it. Just once, she told herself. Business improved within a week, so she used it again, and again, until it became part of the preparation. Every morning, in the passageway beside the building, in the dark, before the customers arrived. 7 years. The first compromise is always the one that matters most. Not because of what it does immediately, but because of the permission it grants for the next one, and the one after that. A boundary crossed quietly in the dark does not stay quiet forever. The silence after she finished speaking was the kind that changes a place permanently. Polisa stood completely still. She was aware of her own heartbeat. Mr. Seal had removed his hat. He was holding it in both hands, looking at the ground. Modlemini made a sound, not words, just a sound, and took several steps backward until she reached the wall of the adjacent building and leaned against it. A young woman near the back of the queue was the first to speak. She said one word. No, just that. No. Then a man in a construction company jacket said, I have been eating here for 5 years. Someone else said, I brought this food to my mother in hospital. A woman near the front covered her mouth with her hand and stood very still. Polisa thought about the colleagues she had introduced. Her sister, her neighbor's husband who made the Saturday detour. She thought about 2 years of Vetkoek. She thought about all the mornings she had stood in this very queue feeling lucky to have arrived early enough. She pulled out her phone without fully deciding to. When something is this wrong, the instinct to document it is not gossip, it is accountability. But the weight of what you record will stay with you long after you press stop. Other phones came out. Mama Siki did not move to stop anyone. She sat on her stool with her hands in her lap like someone who had finally put down something very heavy and discovered that putting it down did not feel the way they expected. The video that police recorded was 4 minutes and 17 seconds long. It was shaky. The crowd noise made some of the words hard to catch. But the confession itself, the voice, the posture, the silence of the queue around it, was unmistakable. By 7 a.m., it had been sent to 11 people. By 9 a.m., those 11 had become 200. By the time police arrived at her office in Pinetown, late for the first time in 3 years, it had reached people who had never visited Lotzi in their lives. Her manager looked up when she walked in. "Police, you're late. And you look like you've seen a ghost." Police set her bag down. She sat. She looked at her colleagues gathering around their desks for the morning. "If I tell you what happened this morning," she said slowly, "some of you will not eat lunch." The office went quiet. Information, once released into a community, follows its own current. You cannot control where it goes. You can only control how honestly you carry what you know. She told them everything. The early morning, the passageway, the covered bowl, the questions from the queue, the sitting down, the voice that did not sound like Mama Siki's voice. At first, as always with things too strange to absorb quickly, there was resistance. "Polisa, are you sure you heard correctly?" Maybe she was confused, maybe she made a mistake explaining. "That woman has been selling for years," she wouldn't. Then one colleague opened her phone. The video was already circulating in 3 different WhatsApp groups she was in. She pressed play. The office gathered around the screen. When it ended, nobody spoke immediately. The man who handled their deliveries, who had eaten Mama Siki's Vetkoek every Friday for 4 years, who had introduced it to his entire church's youth group, sat down very slowly in his chair. He looked at his hands. "I served that food at my daughter's birthday party," he said. Nobody replied. There was nothing to say that would help. Betrayal scales with trust. The deeper the trust, the more devastating the discovery. This is why integrity is not a private matter, it is always, eventually, a community matter. Back in Lotzi, the corner had become a different place. The queue had dissolved, not orderly, not gradually, but suddenly, the way a crowd dissolves when something happens that changes the shared agreement about what people are doing there. Some people had walked away without speaking. Some were speaking too much, filling the air with words because silence felt dangerous. 2 women were crying quietly near the bus stop. Mama Siki's stand, the table, the banner, the pots, the plastic chairs, had been overturned by a man in the crowd. Nobody had stopped him. Nobody had agreed with him either. It had simply happened in the chaos of feeling, the way things do when grief and rage arrive at the same time and no one knows which to lead with. The police came at 8:15 a.m. 2 officers in a van. They spoke with Mama Siki, who was still on her stool, still in the same position. They took her details. They made calls. She was not arrested that morning. There was no specific law she had clearly broken, though people were already discussing this in loud and contradictory terms. The officers advised her to leave the area for her own safety. Someone helped her gather what remained of her things. She walked away from that corner without looking back. The gas burner was still on. Someone turned it off. Auntie Zodwa, who had been watching from her own stand across the road, said nothing for the rest of the morning. She sold very little. Not because customers didn't come to her, they came. But she sent most of them away. She said she needed to think. A community that has been betrayed needs time to grieve before it can judge. And the people who watched from a distance, who also benefited from not asking too many questions, are never entirely outside the story. In the days that followed, the effects spread in ways nobody anticipated. The school down the road quietly changed its breakfast arrangement. The construction foreman named Becky stopped discussing food entirely for 2 weeks. The woman who had served the Vetkoek at her daughter's birthday party told her husband she did not want to talk about it and then cried in the bathroom for 20 minutes. But the strangest consequence was what happened to the other Vetkoek sellers. Auntie Zodwa's queue dropped by half. Not because anyone suspected her, but because trust, once broken in a category, does not stay broken in one place. It spreads. Customers began asking questions at other stands that had never been asked before. What do you use? Can I watch you prepare? Why does yours taste different from the others? One seller, a young woman who had only been operating for 8 months and who was entirely innocent of anything except making good dough, was asked by a customer if she could prove her ingredients were clean. She was so offended she nearly closed her stand that day. Her neighbor talked her out of it. "Don't let someone else's sin cost you your livelihood," she said. "Stay, be transparent. Let people watch you work. Time will restore what one person broke." It was the wisest thing said on that street that whole week. When one person corrupts a shared space, a profession, a community, a reputation, the innocent people in that space bear a cost they did not earn. This is one of the cruelest things about dishonesty. It is never only personal. Polisa went back to the corner 3 weeks later. Not to buy anything, just to see. The table was gone. The burner was gone. The plastic chairs were gone. The corner looked like any other corner, a bit of wall, a lamp post, some litter that hadn't been swept yet. She stood there for a moment. She thought about what she had come for that morning 3 weeks ago. Vetkoek with curried beans. She had been so certain that arriving early would finally solve the problem of the empty trays. She had solved it. She had arrived early enough. She just had not expected what being early enough would show her. She had not gone looking for what she found. She had gone looking for breakfast. A man walking past glanced at her standing there looking at nothing. She was thinking about trust. About the invisible threads we extend to the people who feed us, the people who greet us by name, the people who become so woven into the fabric of our mornings that we forget to wonder whether the weave is sound. She was not angry at herself for trusting. You could not build a life or a community without trust. Trust was not the mistake. Unexamined trust, extended indefinitely without any curiosity at all, that was a different thing. Trust is essential and trust is not unconditional. The healthy version of trust stays open to information. It does not demand suspicion, but it does not flinch from questions either. 6 months later, Polisa heard through the neighborhood that Mama Siki had moved to another area. She did not know if it was true. She did not look further. What she did know was that the corner had eventually filled again, not with one famous vendor but with 3 smaller ones operating side by side, somewhat transparently, in friendly competition. One of them was Auntie Zodwa's niece, a 22-year-old called Dobile who had set up a handwritten sign above her stand that read, "Fresh ingredients, clean hands, open kitchen, watch if you want." People laughed at the sign at first, then they bought. Then they came back. Her queue was never as long as Mama Siki's had been. But it was steady, it was honest. And the people in it were not bound there by something they couldn't explain, they were there because they chose to be. Police bought from Doba every Tuesday and Friday. The Vetkoek was good. Not magical, not inexplicable. Just good, the way things are when they have nothing to hide. What is built on truth does not need mystery to sustain it. Honest quality, offered transparently and consistently, builds the kind of loyalty that does not collapse when someone arrives early. So what does this story teach us? It teaches us that reputation is not the same as character. Mama Siki's reputation was enormous. Her character had been compromised for years. The two can coexist for a very long time, and then stop coexisting all at once, in a single morning, in front of a crowd with phones. It teaches us that desperation does not excuse a harmful choice, but it does explain how ordinary people end up making extraordinary mistakes. Mama Siki was not a monster. She was a woman who made a terrible decision in a dark season, and then kept making it because stopping felt impossible. Understanding this is not the same as excusing it, but it matters for how we think about people and choices. It teaches us that the people harmed most by dishonesty are often not the obvious ones. Yes, the customers were betrayed, but Auntie Zodwa's business dropped. Tobo's newsstand faced suspicion before it had done anything wrong. The young woman who was asked to prove her ingredients were clean. The collective space suffers when one person inside it builds on a lie. It teaches us that arriving early, literally and metaphorically, reveals things. Polisa was not an investigator. She was a woman who wanted breakfast. She arrived early enough to see what later arrivals never saw. In your own life, the willingness to look more closely, to ask the question that seems unnecessary, to arrive before the surface has been arranged, this is not paranoia. It is wisdom. And it teaches us that what replaces something broken can be better, simpler, more honest, less spectacular, and more sustainable. Tobo's sign, open kitchen, watch if you want. That is not a boast, it is an invitation. And it is how trust is rebuilt after it has been broken, not with a big performance, but with consistent, observable honesty, offered every morning without exception. The final lesson is the one Doba knew without being taught: if what you are doing is good, you have nothing to hide. And if you have nothing to hide, say so, and then prove it every single day. This story began with a smell. The smell of something that made people stop walking. Something that made taxi drivers call ahead and school security guards walk faster and grown adults feel, for a moment, like children again. It ended at an empty corner in Omlotsi. And in between those two things was a lesson that goes far beyond Vetkoek. It goes beyond food vendors and queues and WhatsApp videos. It goes into every space where we extend our trust without question. Every relationship we stop examining because it has become familiar. Every institution we assume is sound because it has always seemed sound. Proximity reveals what distance conceals. And the questions we delay asking, because they feel unnecessary, because things seem fine, because we do not want to disturb what is comfortable, those questions do not disappear. They wait. And when someone else finally asks them, in public, at 5 a.m., with a phone already in their hand, the answer changes everything. Ask your questions. Not from suspicion, not from cynicism, but from the simple, healthy understanding that trust is strengthened by examination, not weakened by it. And if the answer is clean, if the kitchen is open and the hands are washed and there is nothing in the passageway, then trust even more deeply. Because that kind of trust is built on something real. If this story taught you something today, if it made you think, if it challenged you, if it will change how you look at something in your own life, please share this video with one person who needs to hear it. And before you go, click on the video appearing on your screen right now, because the next story is just as powerful and I promise you will not want to miss it. Thank you for watching Helen's Cultural Stories. I will see you in the next one.